Basically, when I reached the car, what happened was I knocked her unconscious with a crowbar.
A Seattle cop hoping to coax a last confession from a serial killer just days from the electric chair.
Was she alive or dead? Oh no, she was unconscious, but she was very much alive.
Instead, he hears the secret story and primal thoughts that turn Theodore Robert Cow into Ted Bundy.
It has come down to this. An emergency request to the U.S. Supreme Court for a stay of execution in the case of Theodore Bundy has been rejected this evening. The vote was 5-4. Bundy is scheduled to die in Florida's electric chair tomorrow morning at 7. There may still be some last-ditch legal maneuvers that could cause yet another delay in the execution, including an appeal for clemency to the governor of Florida. But just by way of background, since 1925 in Florida, there have been 202 appeals for clemency, and only 6 have been granted. And Governor Bob Martinez, who will have to make that clemency decision on Ted Bundy, has already indicated that he wants the execution to take place.
I feel a number of states probably rationalize using the death penalty as the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of rationalization. So if somebody took somebody's life, they no longer have the right to live. And so I know that a lot of the money goes with, going sometimes all the way up to the National Supreme Court for the person who was convicted of the death penalty. They're fighting it, and that's where most of the money goes.
We as humans need instant gratification for these sorts of things, and we think more with emotion than we do with our heads regarding cost and price of someone's life.
I'm not a public official, I'm just a student. Through my perspective, I believe it's because in this world there's so much hate, there's so many terrible things happening every single day to innocent people. And if an individual has done enough to deserve even the discussion of a life sentencing, I think it would be because the public and the victims and individual of state officials as a result would feel safer if that individual influence was removed from their community. Although there are easier ways to solve these issues and remove these individuals and these influences, it's perceived as a true treatment of zero tolerance of these sorts of crimes which may have been committed to deserve the sentence. Thank you.
Wow. I have friends on both sides of the religious debate about the death penalty. And so I have some who say, if it's in the Bible, an eye for an eye or tooth for tooth, then by golly, we're going to take their life because they took somebody else's life. I have other friends who really talk about the Christian ideal of forgiveness and that everybody deserves a second chance, and that taking somebody's life because they took somebody's life to start with is just as much a crime. So it really, I think that's where most of the debate comes from, is not from the cost, but from the moral debate and that connection to religion and forgiveness and giving people a second chance.
I don't think your cultural beliefs should be taken into consideration after you've done something worth receiving the death penalty, and that's just my personal opinion.
My personal beliefs, being raised Christian, although I do not hold to those beliefs, fire and brimstone or anything, I believe the death penalty in some scenarios is obtuse and partially unnecessary. However, I do believe it should really depend on the punishment befitting the crime, or if the individual really, through mental examination and physical examination, has shown time and time again no chance of improving, which could either elicit life in prison. I do not believe anyone should die based on those beliefs. However, perhaps if injustice was done unto me, I might feel differently about this. And the death penalty does enhance getting people to think about their actions and not willing to commit crimes as a result. But through my own perspective, for the most part, I do not believe it is necessary.
There's a lot of debate about why it first started, but a lot of people say that the death penalty was used historically in order to deter people from committing certain crimes. And so, public executions were very common, because if we show everybody what happens to you if you commit a certain crime, then obviously people will quit committing those crimes. And historically, we see that those crimes keep being committed. So obviously that change from very public executions, the public hangings, the public beheadings, even when the electric chair came around, the use of and filming and televising somebody being electrocuted, has really changed throughout history. It's become a more private matter.
The death penalty has changed over time with becoming more humane and society kind of becoming more involved, not necessarily with witnessing it, but about it and how it's taken and what happens, because they want things to be more humane so it doesn't hurt people as much, whereas back then...
I think from point A to point B to Z in this scenario, throughout the ages and throughout different countries, there's been many different practices of corporal punishment and the death penalty. We've gone from lynchings and hangings based on accusations by just about anybody rather than an actual court system. The fact that we have an actual judicial system and corporal punishment in some scenarios, I think, has been a humongous game changer. For here in America, I believe, for example, the Salem witch trials. That was a perfect example of when the death penalty was overused in these scenarios, and that's because the public was really having a heavier hand in political issues and in judicial action. And as a result, many innocent people lost their lives because of fear. I think that's been the main driving force in if you're afraid of something, you want to destroy it. And in this scenario, if it's a person, you want to destroy it. But today, people are less and less afraid because we've become more informed. And our judicial system is much more solid than it once was. It's not to the point of perfect yet, we haven't gotten there yet, but the fact that people used to gather around like a social event to either mourn or rejoice over somebody getting their neck cracked on the noose. That's to today we have lethal injections. I think we've definitely come a long way, and I think we understand now that it is not morally acceptable to find joy in the ending of an individual's life, no matter what they might have done.
He didn't look like an outsider. He didn't look like we would think about a predator.
Right.
So you drive off, and what was his demeanor?
Lighthearted. We just had the normal conversation that strangers would have. I told him, my name's Rhonda and I'm a pharmacy student. What are you studying? He told me his name was Ted and he was a law student. In just a couple of blocks, he turned a way that wasn't the normal route to the university. And I asked him about that, and he was very polite and asked my permission if it would be all right if he took a little detour. He told me he had to run an errand up by the zoo, and I told him that would be fine. I didn't care. I thought I would still be home faster than if I had waited for the bus. And then we went right on past the zoo, and I said, hey, I thought we were taking me to the zoo. And he said, no. I said, near the zoo. That road goes over the hill and drops down into Parley's Canyon, which is the main highway back into the city.
Nothing's gone off in your head yet?
Nothing's gone off. We're just having fun. We get to the bottom of that canyon. We should have turned right to go towards campus. And instead he turned left and started driving up another canyon. And as he's driving, he's kind of looking at parking places and side roads. And then he pulled into a parking place and parked the car and turned it off.
So at this point you think, I'm going to have to fend off a romantic advance.
Yes. And then he turned in the car seat, so he's kind of facing me, and he leaned in really close. I thought he was going to kiss me. Instead, he said very quietly, do you know what? I'm going to kill you. And he put his hands on my throat and started squeezing. My first thought was, it has to be some kind of a joke. This guy's got a weirdest sense of humor. But that was just maybe a fraction of a second because I realized he was squeezing too tightly.